I do believe that we're here for a purpose. I believe that, we weren't created just to consume, right? We're here to make a difference. And so if that's truly the case, then there will be something next.
That way. Hello and welcome back to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast. If you're new here, this show is fairly simple. I sit down with people in manufacturing and we talk about how they got here, why they've stayed, where they've messed up, what they've won, what they've learned from, what they're proud of. And if you've gone on this journey with us before, thanks for coming back. Thanks for being a glutton for punishment. Today, I'm talking with Aron Kolosik. So let's get into it. Aron has spent 25 years inside two of the biggest supply chains in the world. He started at P&G and worked his way up to running billion-dollar operations. He became a plant manager, then a chief supply chain officer. And at some point along the way, someone believed in him enough to show him how to lead. That mentorship has changed everything. When he got to the other side of his corporate career, he looked around and realized most people in manufacturing never got what he did. So he left the executive track to help give it to them. So without further ado, Aron, welcome to the Manufacturing Culture Podcast, my man. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks, Jim. I'm getting super excited because as we record this, the March Madness is on its way. So
absolutely.
It's my favorite time of the year. So like spring is happening up here in the north, it's just, finally we're getting some better weather. So life is good.
Who's your team?
I went to school at Iowa State, so that's my team. So the Cyclones, we got a good basketball team, we have a good basketball team.
My Devils just beat the Cyclones yesterday. Yeah, the women, man, I love this time of year. Men's, women's tournament. You've got the conference championships going into March Madness. It's a fun time of year, man.
I feel a little guilty at sometimes, but I'm like, it's my favorite holiday of the year, right? I think of it as a holiday. Yeah, I've taken it for years. I've taken those days off at work, and when I lived in Phoenix, it was the best.
Yeah,
because the games start early, and they don't go. They stay up till late, but it's not like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning like it is out here. But yeah, it's just exciting to watch all those like young, talented men and women like go all out.
Absolutely,
right? Like they're giving it all they got, right? So it's fun to watch.
Yeah, my daughter's got a state game, state championship game tonight. So looking forward to that. Big games this weekend. And looking forward to it. I think you and I should normalize people giving each other gifts for March Madness.
Right. That's good. I think that'd be good.
Let's make that a thing.
Right. There we go.
All right, man. So I don't know if I shared with you my icebreaker question because we've talked a couple of times. All right, man. You're going to enjoy this, I hope. The first icebreaker is, if your life were a movie, what genre would it be? Who would play you? And what's the opening scene?
Wow. It's a great question. I think it would be an action movie. We've been all over the world. I grew up in a small town, but almost like the Truman Show, if you will. Like, whereas like, you grew up in a small town, you didn't know much about what you didn't know. And then once I got out of Iowa after, it was a rapid thing, right? So it was like Iowa, Ohio, Switzerland, Phoenix, back to Ohio. So I think there would be action. It'd just be, it'd be one of those type stories of like a kid that grew up in a small town and didn't really understand what was out there. And as he got out, kind of explored and found all those things. So I think that would be part of it. I think who would play it, man, you would like to think somebody like Matt Damon type, role, right? Where it's just like, again, not super cool dude, in terms of that, but like just a dude that like just goes, right? That thinks about that. And so that's where I think that would be kind of the thought.
Kind of average dude, but a famous average dude, right? A guy who has a wide range in his acting chops, can play Will Hunting to, whatever.
Jason Bourne.
Yeah,
Jason
exactly.
Bourne.
All right. I like it. So what's the opening scene of your movie?
I think the opening scene would be, sorry, man. Like I just get a little emotional. Like I am just super thankful of the life that I've had. right? And I think if the opening scene would be like zooming down on the life that we're building now as a family in the situation, we have 108 acres out here. So it's like, for me, it's like there would be a drone scene or a, scene coming down, just looking at the property that we have and just that the family is out enjoying. And it's like this is a life by design,
Yeah.
right?
I love that.
And I think that would be it.
I love that. And quick qualifiers. You never have to apologize for getting emotional on this show and being vulnerable, man. Like
I appreciate
uh
that.
I expect it out of my guests. I pre-screen guests quite thoroughly, and if you don't have the emotional intelligence to be vulnerable, you're not invited to be on the show, right?
Right.
So
Right.
the
Okay. Then
fact that
I'm more
you
like a baby, but yeah, like we're good. No, but I
all right,
appreciate it.
yeah,
But I am just incredibly thankful. I'm, proud. It's like this, you ride that fine line between like you look at your life and like you're really thankful and proud, and it's not that life hasn't had its tragedies, right? Like you go through that and yet still we're here, right? We're still kicking, we're still moving forward. And I am thankful, as you mentioned, like that I get to spend most of my time helping people. Like that's the cool part about the second half of life, right? It's like when we build up all these skills and all these experiences that we get to actually share and build into others. And so that I'm thankful for.
awesome. I love it. So next icebreaker question, not like as reflective, I don't think, as a first, not maybe as much fun, but what does culture mean to you? Like, what's your definition of culture? Not something that we could find on a poster or, in the dictionary, but for Aaron, what's that definition?
I think for me, it's the look and the feel. Like there's something tangible when you watch how people interact with each other, in a place where, you've got, I mean, culture is a big thing. Good culture, I think, is where people have that respect for each other and they have that conversation. They're not talking over each other, but they can be passionate. They can be fighting and they can go out to dinner, they can go out to lunch. There's a feel of like, hey, we're in this thing together. And I think that to me is that there's not a we they, it's not maintenance and it's not operations, it's not corporate or the plant. It's literally like we're all in this thing together. And for me, that's a culture when you're really moving towards a common objective, regardless of race, color, gender, all of that stuff. Like we're in this thing to win and we're doing it together. I think that to me looks like good culture.
I love it. So let's go back in the Wayback Time Machine here a little bit. How did you get into P&G in the first place? What was manufacturing in the cards for you from the start, or did it just kind of happen for you?
No, it didn't just happen. When I graduated high school, I did pretty good in high school. And I thought, let's go to engineering, math. I was looking at math related fields, right? I was good at math and actuary sciences was one, right? And I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't do that. I couldn't have handled it. I would have been bored out of my mind, but it's good money. It's good money,
Absolutely. Yeah.
but it wouldn't have been good for me. And I thought engineering because they made the most money coming out of undergrad. And I'm like, hey, I don't know that I want to go to be a doctor. But when I went to college, I really focused on partying, lifting, and hanging out with friends. So for those first 3 semesters, like that was the priority. And I wasn't sure. Maybe my dad was a chiropractor. I thought maybe I'd go to medical school afterwards. Maybe I'd do engineering. Really wasn't sure. And I was not doing that great, to be honest. Like I got 3 Ds in my third semester of college. So when you
Wow.
say, how was it going? I'm like, well, it wasn't going good, but thankfully a friend of mine, I was in the weight room and he walked into the weight room and said, hey, I got a job offer from this place to do an internship or a co-op. And he's like, and the HR manager asked me if I knew anybody else that would be interested. And I'm like, yeah, I'd be interested in getting he's like, it's $2,500 a month or something back then, and I was like, yeah, like
Sweet.
sign me up in the mid 90s. And I'm like, and I knew when my grades were coming out. So like, if I could get there and get the interview and use my transcript from the first 2 semesters, which was okay, not great, but it was like way better than having 3 Ds.
Yeah.
And so I did. I went, I interviewed, I got the job, I co-opted there. And when I did that, that's where I first walked into a polyethylene manufacturing facility. So it was like heavy duty refinery type, like Nomex clothing. And I watched, the supervisor, the assistant superintendent, the superintendent, and the plant manager. And I'm like, that's a job I want. Like they're leading all of these people in this organization. You're running your own business. And I was like, man, that would be super cool. And so from that point at 19, I was my fourth semester of school. I was working full time, went back to summer school, then worked in the fall. Like that's when the switch was flipped. And so I went back to college, finished off my chemical engineering degree, started studying some business classes, leadership, operations management, that type of stuff on the side. And when I interviewed, it came down to, it was a good time. It was in late 90s, 98, like good time for engineering. And I had several companies, but if they're like, I want you to be an engineer. And I'm like, no, I want to like run stuff. Like I want to be an operations leader. And P&G offered that to me right away. They're like, hey, within 6 to 12 months, you're going to be running your own operation. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. Like Ernst & Young offered me a great job, which was my other one I was like interested in, but it was management consulting. And I kept thinking to myself, like, I'm 23 years old. Like, who can I consult? Like really, like who can I consult? Like, and I was like, man, like, let's go in and do this. And so that's how I came to P&G. So it was,
That's awesome.
it was definitely a pivot point when I think that's the point earlier was, I think people look at your life now and they think everything was smooth, right? Like it just everything lined up. And it's like, no, it doesn't always line up. It just takes resilience and persistence, right? But 3Ds, like that was almost unrecoverable,
Yeah.
If that would have come out, it would have changed everything.
Absolutely. Was there a time in your early days, your first couple of years with P&G that you felt over your head? Like when in that first, when you got to that point when you were like, all right, I'm running my first operation. Did you ever like, oh my God, what am I doing here? I have no idea.
I think we all have that when you're like going through it, but I wouldn't say I had like a major moment. To your point earlier, I had some really good mentors. Like one of my best friends to this day, his name's Mike Damsey, was my first boss in the company, and he was leading the department and I had a line. And I mean, he showed me everything. Like I still use a personal finance tool that he showed me back in 1998. It was Microsoft Money back then or something, like I still use that tool because he showed me those things. Like I bought my first house on a for sale by owner type thing contract because he showed me how to do the contract because he gave me the contract. And so like he was a great mentor. And then I had another great mentor that would push me on leadership things like, hey, Aaron, your job's not to, I'll never forget this one. He said, your job is not to be the first, to chase the puck down the ice. And your job is to get up there and be ready to score. Like stand by, you're to be up there ahead of everybody else, showing them where to go. And so, I mean, yes, it was overwhelming. I think overwhelming came later in life, like when you're a plant manager, like that certainly came. But in the early days, I felt like and it's why I'm so passionate about what I do now. Cause it's like, man, there's just some little things. Like if you know that you have somebody to talk to, it eases that pain so much more, right? Where it doesn't get so bad, right? Because I think pain escalates over time.
Absolutely. And I think that's a fair point. I think that the people I have talked to who had that early overwhelm in their career, myself, I had a lot of early overwhelm, especially when it came to leadership type roles and things of that nature. The common thread there is they didn't have, or I didn't have that mentor, the person that they could lean on to really, help them through that, help navigate some of those challenges. And it did just pile on and get to a point where all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, what am I doing here? And I asked for a demotion because I felt so overwhelmed.
Well, and as you said that, I also reflect back, like this was a big plant that I was in. I wouldn't say 500-600 people. And so when you think about frontline leader, there were probably 10 of us. And so the other thing that I had was also the peer support network, right? So it was like, it wasn't just the leadership mentor, but it was also like, I wasn't the only one. So when we were going through that, like that camaraderie, was so important. And I mean, early on, it's hard to switch that like competitive nature when you come out of college. Because, like, I mean, we're all ingrained, I swear, till the early 20s. Like, it's like it's you or you versus the world. And there comes a point, and then I hope for most of us that we reach the point where it's like us and the world, not us versus the world, right? And that was huge for me because I had some good friends, and we would talk about things and sharpen things, and that was a ton of fun. That really helped support me. It was a peer sponsor, if you will.
I love that, us with the world
Yeah.
instead of us versus the world, because there's a subtle mindset shift when
It's
you
huge.
use the term with versus. And it's the us versus the world mindset kind of takes a stance of, man, either I'm a victim, right? Because I have to feel like I'm fighting everybody, or it's that other mentality, right? We're always facing an other person or group of others. And so I love that subtle change in that. How long were you at P&G?
23 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
It's
amazing.
a
Now,
full.
why'd you stay for so long?
Well, I mean, I enjoyed what I was doing. So I think, I stayed and I continued to progress. And there were moments where I thought I would leave. I think, it was very clear. I always wanted to be a plant manager from that moment at 19. And there was a point, I would say, about 10 or 11 years in the career where I'm like, I don't know that this may happen. And as that looked like it might not happen, there were certainly moments, but I was really clear with the company. I think at that point I'd been with the company 12 or 13 years. I'm like, hey, if this doesn't happen soon, I'm going to have to go. And I just, it wasn't weird. It wasn't like a threatening thing. It was just like, hey, Jim, man, like I tell my boss, I'm like, I really need to be, and want to be a plant manager. And if it can't happen here, I'll never be mad because like things just happen. But if something can't happen in the next 6 months, because I felt like I had been, you know, this next thing's gonna come. This next thing's gonna come. It was like it was never coming. And finally got to the point where I'm like, hey, I'm not even gonna create a LinkedIn account until the next 6 months. But in 6 months, I'm gonna create a LinkedIn account and start looking. And I said, that's not a threat. It's just saying, hey, I really have to do this. And so they actually appreciated that, like that transparency. And that then I got the plan. So then after the plant, it was get the family to, after I did that for 4 years in Phoenix, then we came to Ohio. I was like, so then the next thing was my family and just really trying to get them settled into high school and all those things. Right. And then, I got promoted to vice president and I was leading internationally. And that the moment came where I remember being in Switzerland for 30 days at a time and going, I think there's something else I can do. Right. And that was the moment where I decided to go.
Yeah. I mean, your story is the exact opposite side of the coin from mine as far as having that conversation, right? I was with a
Right.
organization that I said, hey, I want to run on the strategy, the communications side out of our corporate office. They said, okay, go to school, get your bachelor's. Because I dropped out of college after a semester. Like it was not for me when I was 18 years old. I
Sure. Totally. I
focused
mean, totally get it. I was at the pivot, that moment. Right.
I focused on the drinking out of the three things you focused on.
Right.
The drinking was the one thing for me, or the partying, right? So I went back to school, finished 4 years. I was 34 when I graduated, right? I went back to school at 30, much different collegiate experience.
Sure.
Went to my company and said, okay, here's a slip of paper that said that I sat through classes for 4 years for you, right? Like I got this slip of paper that said I can focus long enough to receive this piece of paper. And they said, now we need an MBA. And I said, okay, let's do it. So I rolled it into an MBA. I went to OU, got my MBA, finished that. And they said, now you're just too valuable. We can't take you out of the field. And I said, bye.
Yeah. Goodbye.
That was my moment. That was my exit, right? But it sounds like P&G was for you that company that you could talk to and lay out what you wanted your career path to look like, not what they wanted it to look like.
Yeah. And I think in general, that's true. And it did up until the end, right? Till, I'm 22 years in and vice president. There's only in supply chain, there's vice president, senior vice president, and then chief supply chain officer of this $80 billion company. So it's like there's only a couple more layers. And so the chances of politically that aligning are pretty small. And I had found myself moving to Switzerland with every good intention. My thought was my son's going to be a junior in high school. My other son's in college. I'll come over here in Europe for 2 years. I was already traveling a lot. My younger son will graduate high school, and then my wife will come visit me in Europe for like we'll live in Europe. Like it'll be awesome. Like empty nesting in Europe was going to be awesome. That was all cool until COVID hit, right?
Mm.
And I'm over in Switzerland, and my boss, said, "Hey, you're gonna have to stay there." I'm like, nobody's even going in the office. Like I was in an apartment for 30 days at a time. And she's like, yeah, but for tax reasons and et cetera. And I'm like, which I'm sure are probably true. But at the same time, I'm like, I also get to make a choice, right? I don't want to do this anymore. And so like, I felt like at the end, it was like, you got all the way to the end. And there was a little bit of that, like, is this all there is after 20 something years? So I did have it wasn't that there wasn't some bitter taste at the end, but at the end of the day, like the training that I received and how to treat people and the P&G systems of high performance work systems and employee engagement, employee ownership were really strong. And as I've been out in the marketplace over the last 5 years, it's been I'm like, wow, I didn't recognize how good that was, because it is different.
So you left P&G. What are you doing now?
Yeah, so I left P&G after 23 years. I went to be the chief supply chain officer of a $3 billion company called Central Garden and Pet. So I did that for about 3.5 years, or a little more than 3.5 years, like 3 years, 9 months. But I would say about 9 months before the end of that, before I got done with that, I really felt something different inside. And I think that's why I have so much gratitude, is because I felt like there was something more I should do. And it was odd because I'm like, I have everything I ever wanted. And people might listen to this and say, dude, like, what are you complaining about? Like, well, no, but sometimes you just know that there's something else you're supposed to do. I couldn't be content. Faith is part of my life, but like there was a song that I'd sing at church and I'd start crying because I was not content. And I was like, what does matter with me? And I don't know if it was midlife crisis or whatever it was, my mid 40s or whatever, but I really dug deep into what that was about. And as I reflected, I realized what I really enjoyed most was helping people get to that next level, like coaching and mentoring. And as I reflected, I thought, what if I could do that full time? Like, what if that's just the job? And I brainstormed some things and I put together some programs. And 2 years ago, I kicked off my first small group cohort and it went amazing. And then people paid me for it. And I'm like, that's kind of cool. Like you just never think about that being in corporate for 7 years or whatever. And so September 2024, last 18 months, I decided to step away with the company I was at and I went full time into coaching. And so it took me a little bit to find my feet because it is not, being an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart. It's different.
Right. 100%.
I didn't understand that. People told me that. Didn't understand it till you're in it, right? Like, it's like, even just the little things, like being home with my wife being home. She's like, are you ever going to travel again? Like, this is like, I'm seeing too much of you. And so I'm like, but about October last year, I really niched down. I really started to think about this business and where can I have the biggest impact? And that's really where I came back to manufacturing. And it was my first love. 19 years old, stepped into that plant and that's when it flipped. I'll never forget some of the names, Mike Kujeric and like in that first plant, like names of people that I knew that had influence on me that were mentors. And I'm like, well, what if I could do something like that in this space? And so that's where I started the manufacturing mentorship group, which is my group program. I started doing one-to-one coaching with plant managers. I call it the Plant Manager Accelerator because I view that, having been in that role, I don't care if you've got a 10-person machine shop. I don't care if it's 200 people. It's still lonely. Like, it's still hard. There's a lot of stuff. And so I spend time one-to-one coaching there. I do a group program. And then I just, recently launched an online course for people to work through a personal operating system and these jobs will take everything you have. They will. Like, that's just because the work is never done. So learning how to make sure that those other things stay within some guardrails is really important. So yeah, now I coach manufacturing leaders, those who are at the top, those who are trying to become at the top, and the full-time gig now.
It's awesome. So You're pushing on 30 years since you started at P&G. Is there a mistake that you made as a leader that almost haunts you to this day?
I think before I left P&G, when I took that assignment, I took it with all good intentions. But that decision to move over there, almost crushed my everything. And it strained my relationship with my wife, which I had always thought was like unbreakable. And we have an amazing relationship, but like for somebody that is like her personality type, for me to be away that long was not good. And I took that assignment, and that assignment again during COVID, I had multiple regions, and it was just too much. And it's back to the overwhelm. Like it was just way much. I had Asia and Latin America and Europe. And I remember one day, I mean, I was just being an ass. Like I could tell, right? I wasn't, I knew it, but like, whatever, I'm just getting through it. And I had a director that was like a couple levels below me ping me on Teams one day. And she's like, "What's the matter with you?" Or like, "What's going on? Like, you're not being yourself." And I'm like, one, what courage, from her to do that. But then two, like, so thankful because to your point, if I hadn't changed that, like I was literally doing everything that I said I wouldn't do. Right? I'm putting my family at jeopardy. I'm not being the person that I want to be. Like the leader I wanted to be. I really felt like all of that was being sacrificed for this particular job and this particular role. And that one, if I wouldn't have made that change in the moment, would have haunted me forever. So it turned into a thankful experience. But yeah, it was close.
Got it. What do you think? I mean, I want to go back to your point about it being lonely, right?
Yeah.
In that position, that leadership position. What do you think that people who haven't been in that role, haven't experienced that, what do people think that role does that is just like the wrong misconception of a plant manager or top line leadership, frontline leadership role at a manufacturer?
Yeah, I think, I remember looking up to that role, being a younger manager and thinking, man, look at that big house, look at the money that they have, look at all of the things that they have as a reflection of a good life, right? And it doesn't always equate. You don't, and what they don't think about is they just see the stuff that happens within the plant, right? So you see the downward motion, the things that you're doing, and you're thinking, oh, you're not the one that has to get like there's a safety frontline problem or something like that. It's like, well, no, ultimately, like if something seriously happens, you are, because you are the company for the, like at the end of the day, like any of your employees, like you're the company. Like you view Aron as the plant manager as Procter and Gamble, right? And people don't think about that pressure. And then what they also don't understand is the pressure from external, corporate, sideways pressure, especially in some of these larger organizations. There's a huge matrix, like you don't get to make all the decisions. Like they think that you get to make all the decisions and like everything's great. It's like, man, you can't even, today you can't even decide what garbage can you buy because procurement has already determined that, which is the right thing to do. But it's a misconception that they think that they have all the decision space. Like they don't. And that can be frustrating. And when you're sitting there thinking you should, because you're like, man, when I get there, I can make all the things. Well, it's not that easy.
I like that. So when you're working with these leaders in your coaching company, is there a moment that you see something click with the people who go through your program? Like, is it that visual light bulb popping above their head, right? Is there that moment that most people who go through your cohort, is it visible like that?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's probably two big moments. The first one is when you start asking yourself questions versus a standard, it's completely different. When I say, "Hey, Jim, how's your life?" Like, "Oh, I've got a good relationship with my wife, like daughter, great." But what does that look like? When I start asking you more questions like, well, what's the truth about your communication? Like, what's the truth about the quality time? What's the truth about, like, when we start going through those questions of like exploring deeper, like people have this aha moment of like, man, I'm just drifting. Like some of these things are completely off the rails. I didn't even realize that they're off the rails because I've just been comfortable. Right. And so oftentimes I call it there's a wake up moment in the beginning because I challenge them to live a holistic life. I'm looking at their physical health, their relational health, their mental health, and their professional health is like overlapping because like the reality is when one of those things are out of whack, it affects the other. And that first of all is an aha. They're like, oh, I didn't even think about that. But like when you think about it, like if I would say, hey, we typically deal with it on the aftermath. Oh, you had a heart attack. Oh, make sure you take care of yourself. Like make sure you do all the right things. And it's like, but where were you when you were putting like all that chronic stress and pressure and all those other things on them ahead of time? Or I'm going to get a divorce. Oh, I'm so sorry. Please take care all the time you need. Well, where were you when you're asking them to stay till 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night on Friday nights, or you're bugging them on Saturday mornings and they're not spending time with the family? And like that does affect all of those things. And so that is one moment. And then the second one is when they start to realize that the limitations are mostly limitations they put on themselves.
Okay.
Beliefs, stories that are in their head, things that are like limiting. I call them limiting narratives. Like, I can't do that because X. And then when we start to challenge those things, they're like, like you didn't even think about it. Like for me, like leaving P&G, the reason why I left P&G was because I was in a cohort. I was in a cohort with a group of guys that looked at me and said, dude, you're miserable. And I'm like, no, I'm just enduring. That's what we do.
Right.
I'm a Gen Xer, man. We endure, like we just get it done, there were no kids, no parents at home. We just go, but it's like, that's what you do is you endure until somebody brought in a different narrative, which is like, that's unacceptable what you're going through. And I'm like, oh, but I'm like, then I was like, well, I can't leave P&G because I don't know if I could be successful outside P&G, a narrative. Right. And that kept me. It's like, why did you stay? Well, that was one of the reasons, right? I didn't think I could be successful outside of P&G. Like not the system kind of grooms you and you're like, that's the way it is. And you're like, oh, I don't know. And so when they start to realize those narratives are in their own head, like that is another aha moment for many of us, right? It's like, wow, I didn't realize that. And so those two moments are pretty big usually.
I like it. Over the course of your entire career to this point, what's the win, the success story that sticks with you the most?
I think the one that sticks with me the most, and just thinking through, there's so many great experiences I've had, but I think Phoenix, when I was in Phoenix plant was a great success story. And I think I came into that plant, we were at 80% customer service. Our safety was really poor, like 3.2% incident rate. Our costs had skyrocketed. And then coming out of that, and I went into that, I worked for P&G, but I was seconded to another company. So another company actually owned the plant at the time. And so I was working on behalf of another company. So it was kind of cool. So I was kind of on my own and for the first 18 months. And so when I look at that, and we came out of that and we had like 3+ years at 99.5% customer service and 0 recordables. And, like the costs weren't moving in the right path. Like that's the piece where I'm like, everything that I'd ever hoped to be true about being a plant manager came true. Right. And it was amazing. And so I think that's the one that sticks with me because we had an amazing team. We built an amazing team and then it stayed strong for a couple years, right? Like that's the other piece for me. It's like you do something and it's like, well, is it completely dependent upon you or is it upon the systems and team that you built? And for me, it still comes back to the systems and teams. And
I love it.
It was a cool experience.
I love it. If the version of you who took that first plant manager job heard this conversation, what's the biggest takeaway you would have?
I think, to not like, there's never an end point. I think we think that, we put our eyes on a goal and sometimes we achieve those goals. Sometimes we don't. Right. But then when we get there, like just be ready and be patient. Right. I think that's the piece, but always be seeking. Like, I think I do believe that we're here for a purpose. I believe that, we weren't created just to consume, right? We're here to make a difference. And so if that's truly the case, then there will be something next. I was a little lost after being the plant manager for a while, to be honest. And I pressured, like after I left there, we came back here to Ohio. I made some poor deals because I
Okay.
was pressuring,
Yeah.
right? Versus just being patient and listening and spending more time listening. That's one thing I did not have as a skill back then in terms of meditation and mental health and just being like actually taking the time just to be silent. I think the takeaway is like, hey, put that into place ahead of time. Like I learned to value that
Mm-hmm.
through the years during the plant manager's assignment and before. But if I could have learned that earlier, man, it would have been so much better, because I had a long drive down 30, I was going down the interstate from Happy Valley Road in your area down all the way down. So I'd have some big long drives in the morning and big long drives at night. So I could spend some time in silence and it was good,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it worked.
Aaron, what haven't I asked you that you want to share with the audience?
I think this game, the game that we all play, right? When we think about culture and this piece of that I shared earlier on these four aspects of mental, relational, physical, and professional. I mean, I really want the audience to hear like that does matter. And a lot of folks that listen to manufacturing stuff, or they think about culture, they think about systems and processes, and we get Lean Six Sigma folks in place. And there are a couple things that come to mind. One, process always follows pain, right? A lot of times people will get book smart and we'll try to go into this and like, hey, here's the process, like we got to do all these processes because the manual says do these processes. Well, a lot of times pain necessitates the process, right? People will buy in a little bit more. And then with that, I think when you look at your personal life, like we should all have our own personal operating system. Like what really works for you? When I think about my days, I have a good morning routine. I have some good reflection time, like what worked yesterday and what didn't work yesterday. I think about my week and I have some reflection time on the week and where am I going? It's like all of these tools that we use in the workplace can be applied to our personal lives with some intentionality. And I would just encourage folks to listen and say, hey, you can have it all. Like I want people to understand, like you can have good physical health. You can have great relationships. You can have stillness and silence, and you can have a great career and do things that you love if you're intentional. And that takes some work, but it's possible. Like you don't have to just endure like I did for several years where I'm like, this is miserable and push my life to the very brink. Even with all the tools I had, I still pushed it to the brink. You don't have to do that. And you learned it. It took you a while to get out of it. I mean, and undergrad than MBA. That's the lesson was like, you know what? Are you better off for it now? 100%.
Absolutely. Yep.
Because you made a tough choice and you went. And so I think a lot of us think that we're kind of trapped into our situation when we're really not. And if you need help, you should be asking for help. Mentorship is a key thing. That's why I do it, because I can give you some perspective and we can shortcut some things for you pretty quickly just because of our different perspective. And so
I love it. I love it. Aaron, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the easiest way. For me, I use that quite often. You find me. I'm the only Aron Kolosik out there. I also have a website at www.aronkolosik.com that has all my services, project, newsletter, all those things are out there. Pretty easy to get a hold of me that way. So thankful for a unique name in that way.
Absolutely. And this will be coming out after the Work But Make It Human episode that Aron was on. So if anybody out there has enjoyed this episode, listen to the Work But Make It Human episode that Aron and I talked about, because we dive way deeper into his framework, his operating system, how what he does makes the world of work more human for anybody who goes through his program. So check out that show. Aron, thank you so much for being here, man. I've really enjoyed our conversations, even the ones that we're not recording to put on the interwebs, right? We just have good conversations. You're a good dude. I appreciate your vulnerability. I appreciate your willingness to share the mistakes that you've made, the wins that you've had, because for young people, for people who are feeling stuck, it's just it's validating to know that people like you, people like me, we have those mistakes, we have those roadblocks, we have those moments in our lives, right? But we also have the wins, and it's good for people to see that wins do come, even if you're in a place where you don't feel like I'm ever going to get a win again. So thank you for coming on and
You bet, man.
being yourself and sharing your story with us. So ladies and gentlemen, please go on to whatever platform you're listening to this show on. Rate and review the show. Write in the comments, it's us with the world, not us versus the world. Every time you rate and review the show, somebody else finds it. It's not for my ego. It's not for my guest's ego. It's so more people find the show and can hear Aron's story because it's important. So thank you all for being here. Until next time, keep making things.